Hello there, boys and girls. Welcome to Scottish Geeks. It's Storytime Sunday again. Today's story is called If This Is Hell, Then It's Contagious. Enjoy. I work as a barista at the Starbucks down the street. I usually work the morning shifts, just because it was the beginning of the day, which brought more customers and meant more tips, if any. One morning, when I was walking towards the Starbucks a couple of blocks from my apartment, I noticed a man sitting on the sidewalk in front of the door. At first, I assumed that it was just someone in desperate need for a coffee, but as I got closer, the dirty, tattered clothing gave it away that he was, in fact, a homeless person. We get a lot of them, being close to the city and all, and would always loiter in front of the shop since they had nowhere else to go, especially in the morning, so we simply just shoo them away from the shop. As I prepared to approach him and tell him to leave, or else I'll call the cops, I noticed that the man was rubbing the bottom of his forearms against the concrete. I didn't really think anything of it at first, but when he noticed me, he gasped and grabbed for the door handles and pulled himself up. It was dark. His movements were quick, but I caught a quick glimpse of his face. It seemed deformed. His facial features swollen and lumpy. Scared, he quickly scurried away before I could even say one word to him. I walked up to the door and looked down at the spot where he was rubbing his forearms. The concrete was stained a dark red. Blood. Not much, but it was enough to suddenly concern me about the well-being of the guy. When I looked, he was nowhere in sight. I figured I'd wash it off with some hot water before opening up the shop, so I quickly brushed it off, chalking his weird behaviour as a result of some kind of drug. As I unlocked the door, I grabbed the handle and yanked the door open, only to immediately pull my hand away. Some kind of wet substance had covered the handle, the consistency similar to some type of cooking spray. I'm not really much of a germaphobe, but you all have to agree with me that wet door handles are fucking gross. Especially if they're bathroom door handles. Or, in my case, door handles that had just been used by a cracked out crazy homeless person. I quickly wiped my hand on my pants and went inside and washed my hands with hot water, lathered them in soap a little longer than I usually do. After getting as much of the blood off the sidewalk as possible and sanitising the door handle with the hobo grease, I opened the shop and prepared for the morning rush. That night was when my hell started. After work, I was sitting at my computer searching for jobs, though most pointless things like Facebook and other sites were mostly distracting me. While typing at my computer, I looked down at my arms and noticed some light red dots on my skin, similar to mosquito bites. They weren't big or a deep red, just tiny spots, no bigger than the head of a pencil eraser. No itching or burning, they were just there. I hadn't been outside at all that day, so it couldn't have been mosquito bites, and I didn't eat anything that would have caused an allergic reaction of some kind. My next thought was maybe fleas or bedbugs, but neither my neighbours nor I owned any animals, and our apartment complex hadn't the issues with bedbugs as far as I knew. After examining them for a bit, I ignored them. Whatever it was that was causing it would fix itself. The next morning, I woke up and walked into the bathroom. When I looked in the mirror, I was taken aback when I noticed more of the red spots speckled all over my body. Not only were my arms covered with them, but so was my chest, stomach, back, and shoulders, even my legs and feet. My neck was clustered with them, but thankfully my face was spared as only a couple marked my forehead, cheeks, and nose. I'll admit, this did freak me out quite a bit. More so from how unexpected it was waking up to a sight like that. But when I noticed that these spots still didn't itch, burn, or bother me in the slightest, I decided not to worry about them, get dressed, and head to work. Worrying about them would only make it worse, right? Throughout the day, I worked through the stares and double takes people were giving me as I took and made their orders. I'd noticed that the red dots started to get bigger and blotchier. To make matters worse, they also started to itch. I tried my best not to scratch them, at least not in front of the customers. I knew they wouldn't find it attractive to see the person handling their drinks scratching at some weird skin condition. After I got off work, I went home and immediately started doing some research into what the hell was happening to me. I researched hives, poison ivy, oak, skin allergies, skin conditions, psoriasis, everything. From what I gathered, what I had was the result of possible hives which are caused by pretty much everything. Stress, weather, food allergies, chemicals, clothing detergent, body soap, etc., plants, animals. Reading about this started to worry me more than I was when it all started. I decided to schedule an appointment the next day with my doctor just to get a professional opinion, instead of advice from the internet. Night came around, and I decided to go to bed early. The itching was still a nuisance, but nothing too bothersome, so I didn't bother buying anti-itch cream for the developing rash that my body was suddenly going through. The next morning, I woke up and walked to the bathroom. When I looked in the mirror, you guessed it, the rash had only gotten worse. My skin was extremely puffy and blotchy. Several areas were a deep red and felt bumpy to the touch, but the worst part was how itchy the infected areas had become. I scratched all over, which brought much relief but left dark scratch marks in areas I had scraped with my fingernails. This sounds narcissistic, but I was happy to see that my face wasn't as badly affected by the reaction. My cheeks were pretty flushed and my nose was puffy as well as my forehead, but I still looked like a normal human being. Luckily, I didn't have to work this morning, but I did have my doctor's appointment in an hour, so I got dressed, ate a quick bowl of cereal, and booked out of my complex to the clinic a couple of miles away. The doctor looked over my body and asked me several questions, such as the foods I had eaten, the detergent I had washed my clothes with, the animals I had come in contact with. Everything was mentioned in the research I had done the day before. All of the answers I had given him had him conclude that what I had was simply a bad case of hives, and give me some steroid shots to help bring the reaction down, patch everything up. I picked up some anti-itch cream on the way home and went to bed for a nap. I had worked that evening and decided to get some rest beforehand. When I woke up, I immediately noticed that the itching had gotten worse. I looked at my arms, which were even more swollen than they were this morning. All of my skin had become deep red that plagued only parts of my body this morning. The bumpy texture was more prominent than before, and as I looked in the mirror, I saw that most of my body was covered in the puffy, bumpy skin rash. My fingers were even swollen, my face was very red, as if it had been sunburned, and my nose had even started to blister and peel. What the fuck was happening to me? I called my work and I told them that I couldn't make it tonight, but they told me that another co-worker who was also working tonight had already called in sick. There was nobody else to cover me. I told them my condition, but they told me there was nothing they could do and they needed me to come in. After a few cuss words from under my breath, I figured I would push through the night shift and just get it over with. I asked if I could take off work the next day, in which they replied with, "Oh, we'll see what we can do." After slathering some anti-itch cream on my entire body, I got to work. There, the itching got increasingly worse. I tried my best to scratch, only when none of the customers were looking. Some even asked if I was okay. I told them that it was just an allergic reaction, so as to not gross them out as I made their drinks. I itched. I scratched. It felt like tiny bugs with spiky legs were crawling underneath my clothes, and I would rub my arms against the counter and I'd attempt to secretly scratch them. When behind the coffee machine, I would scratch furiously at my clothes before coming back out with a smile on my face or calling the customer to pick up the drink. When there weren't any customers in the shop, I would run to the bathroom and scratch my arms and legs, chest, stomach, shoulders, back, scrub my hands as much as possible, and after a few hours I went to the bathroom and I noticed that I was bleeding, with scratch marks all over my arms, chest and stomach. The bumpy texture grew worse as well. The bumps had formed into clusters and clumps of yellow bubbly pustules that shimmered in the poorly lit bathroom. I looked at my face, the skin on my nose flaked away as I scratched it. The blisters grew into tiny bubbles that felt like bubble wrap. I noticed more blisters forming on my forehead and even a few on my cheeks. While touching the blisters, I noticed that I had dried blood and pus stuck underneath my fingernails. How long had that been there? Was it there when I was handling customers' food and drinks? I left the bathroom after I washed my hands for what was probably 10 minutes and returned to a line of customers who weren't exactly happy that they had waited to be served. As I took their orders, I rushed to get every drink finished. I was sweating from rushing back and forth from the anxiety of what was happening to my body. I noticed blisters forming on my arms and fingers while preparing the drinks. The heat from the coffee makers made me perspire from my arms and hands as well, which began to irritate the blisters that were beginning to form. I began to feel delirious. I've never fainted or passed out before, but I felt like I was going to. I began to feel lightheaded. "This isn't a grand iced caramel macchiato," a customer said. I looked over and saw her standing at the customer pickup counter. Excuse me? "This is a tall. I asked for a grande." With a couple of customers in line, I asked them for hold on just for a minute, and I walked over to her and I said I would make her a grande and give her a refund. I wasn't up for any argument from a customer and took the easy way out. "No, you know what? Forget it. Every time I've come in here I've received horrible customer service. This is ridiculous," she exclaimed. I apologised, but she would accept it and pushed the drink back. "I don't want it anymore. Just give me my money and get back so I can leave." The blisters on my face tingled and burned. For a moment I thought I even felt them pulsing and bubbling as if they'd moved on their own. The customer and I must have been no less than 2 feet away from each other, but it was enough distance for her to be the target of the sudden and the projectile squirt of pus and other juices that resided within the blisters on my nose. As a spray of yellow landed on her face, she flinched back a bit, unsure of what exactly had just hit her. But when she opened her eyes and saw me patting my nose with my fingers and saw the loose string of yellowish white coagulated waste stretching from the broken blister bubbles to the tip of my left index and middle fingers, she was well aware of the sudden health violation that she'd now been involved in. That night, I was fired. The shop closed early. My manager told me that I'd be lucky if the lady didn't press charges. When I returned home, I took a hot shower. Very hot, scalding hot. It burned like hell, but at the same time it brought some kind of satisfaction to my blistering skin. I could feel my skin shrivelling at the heat. When I looked down, I saw blood rush down my body and down the drain. Every blister had popped due to the hot water, and thick, bloody pus gently squirted from each deflated bubble. I must have stood in that hot shower for at least an hour. I dried myself up and I went to bed naked. My whole body burned and I was very hot. I turned my air conditioning as low as possible and turned my fan on high in hopes that it would soothe the pain, but it didn't do much. I could feel my skin throb, tightening up and swelling as the rash took over. I itched horribly and I scratched all night long. I must have passed out from exhaustion only to wake up the next morning in searing pain. I couldn't see. My eyes were swollen shut. They burned as well as the rest of my body. I felt like I had fire ants crawling all over my body, and I could feel them crawling all over me, biting me, stinging me constantly as every inch burned beyond belief. I stumbled to the bathroom and struggled for the light switch. Even the touch to the wall brought immense pain to my fingertips. Once I turned the lights on, I forced my left eyelid open. It took me a second to pry it open as the dry pus from the blisters on my eyelid crumpled apart. What I saw was horrifying. My entire body was covered in blisters and bubbles, huge ones, blisters bubbling on top of other blisters, giant pus-filled sacks that looked ready to pop at any second. I'm sure you've seen those photos of third-degree burns that people get when they spill boiling water or grease on them. That's what these looked like. I managed to keep my left eye open and I felt the blisters. They jiggled at the slightest touch and they sent a huge surge of pain throughout my body. I doubled over, which only created more ripples of pain that almost brought me to my knees. The areas around the blisters itched, and I attempted to relieve it by lightly scratching around the bubbles, which helped a little, but it felt like the itching came from beneath my skin. I rubbed my eyes as the eyelids were the only area of my body that didn't seem to erupt in pain when I touched them. I rubbed and scratched, scraping off chunks of dry pus and pulling at my eyelashes which slid out of their pores easily, follicles still intact. I had trouble opening my right eye. I pried it open with my fingers. That's when I realised I was blind in that eye. No matter how wide I pulled my eyelids apart upon closer inspection, I noticed tiny blisters growing on my eyeball. The itching grew worse as I looked in the mirror. My form twisted and grew even more and more grotesque. I could feel the itching inside my head. I shoved my finger into my right ear and dug deep, scratching all around and scraping what I could only imagine being more blisters than it had developed inside my ear canal. When I pulled my finger out, it was covered in blood. It wasn't enough. I grabbed a Q-tip and I shoved it inside my ear and I scraped it around. A huge sense of relief suddenly washed over my body and I almost collapsed in the amount of pleasure that came with the scraping of the cotton against my blistered ear canal. I didn't even hear the loud pop and the ringing that followed as a Q-tip busted through my eardrum, which only exacerbated the pain that my body was feeling. I yanked the Q-tip out and screamed in pain. Blood leaked out of my ear, mixed with pus and slivers of blistered skin. I grew extremely dizzy. The ringing in my ear disappeared. My vision blurred and grew black. I passed out in the bathroom door. I need help. I'm sitting at my computer typing all this out for you to read because I honestly don't know where else to post it or who else to tell. I can't see out of my right eye and my left eye is almost swollen shut now. One large blister slowly growing larger on my eyelid. By tomorrow the blister will probably grow over my eyelid and completely engulf my eye. Every part of my body is covered in these blisters and they're starting to pop on their own. My sheets are soaked in pus and blood. I can barely move without coming close to passing out from the pain, so I decided to stay at my computer desk. I've tried calling my doctor, but the receptionist said he didn't come into work. He too is developing some kind of serious skin condition. My hair has fallen out and sits in clumps on my desk as it falls in front of me. My teeth are starting to fall out too. The blisters are beginning to form inside of my mouth. My tongue and throat are beginning to swell too. Breathing is getting harder and it's really scaring me. My theory about that itching from beneath the skin is coming true. I think the rash is growing in my body cavity and all over my organs. I now understand why that homeless man was scraping his forearms on the sidewalk. He was trying to relieve the itch. It goes deeper than just the skin. Just earlier this evening, out of complete delusion and loss of mind, I took my cheese grater and I used it to scratch my legs since all of my fingernails have fallen off. It created an immense amount of pain as the metal grate sliced through my skin and muscle and popped every pustule bubble filled with bloody yellow goop. The relief I got from the itch made me oblivious to how much I had used the grater on my leg. When I looked down, a good chunk was already gone. And before I actually realised that I was doing the same thing to my other leg until each hole in the grate was too clogged with flesh and pus. I've been seeing recent reports in the local news about increasing numbers of patients in hospitals going in because of a skin rash they'd developed. We should all take precautions in our diets and avoid contact with anything that can cause allergic reactions with the skin. I don't know what that homeless man had, but whatever it was infected him and then he gave it to me. I feel horribly guilty for anyone who's come into contact with me because of being infected as well. Whatever this is, it's one of the worst things a person could get. And I hope to God if he or any existent scientist can come up with a cure before it becomes global. Who knows how many people have it and where else in the world that this skin condition or fungus or bacteria exist. The pain is unbearable. The itching is unbearable. I think tonight I'm going to end it all. At least the itching will go away. Ooh, oh, I didn't like that story. It's made me really itchy now. Oh dear God, I don't know about you. Are you guys scratching? Wow, that was insane. Oh man. Yeah, anyway, thank you so much for watching and listening. Please don't forget to like, favourite, comment and subscribe. And until next time, bye bye.